I'm going to go over a few things that are new. Installation and configuration, upgrade considerations, a few things to keep in mind for the user experience, and then I'll follow with a quick demo, and then we'll open it up for questions. So what's new? With Zowe Explorer V2, we're going to have support for the Zowe CLI's team configuration files for the profile management. We have refined our Zowe Explorer settings to follow VS Code standards. I'll show you how that'll look during the demo today. We've removed the secure credentials setting from our user settings in VS Code, since the Zowe CLI is handling all the secure credentials now, and you are not required to have an additional plugin or anything for that to work. We have added a new capability to refresh Zowe Explorer, which will update the views and reflect different profile handling to include the config file. This new capability is available using some quick keys and through the command palette, which I'll also demonstrate later in the demo. For installation and configuration, it's pretty simple. You know, VS Code, if you stick with your default settings, you're automatically going to be updated when the extension is published. If you do have a user setting for the auto update set to false in your user settings, you can easily update by going to your extensions tab, clicking on your Zowe Explorer, and then click the update button in the editor view for Zowe Explorer. Some upgrade considerations to keep in mind. For users that will be using Zowe Explorer 2.0 VS Code extension, if you plan on using the CLI alongside, you'll want to also update that to your version 7.0 of the Zowe CLI. Users that are using Zowe Explorer 2.0 and want to have the FTP extension or the Kix extension extend Zowe Explorer, you'll also want to update those to their version 2.0 so everything works together. Any other VS Code extensions that you may be using that extend Zowe Explorer and bring in new functionality, you may need to check if those extensions have compatible versions available. If not, maybe you can reach out to the developers or your contact for those extensions and see when that may be available, because there could be break-in changes using a V1 extension that that extends Zowe Explorer. User experience, with the V2 Zowe Explorer, we will have backwards compatibility for your V1 YAML profiles for users that already have that in place. If a team configuration file for the profile management is in place at a global level, which means inside your .zoe home directory, or at a working project level, V1 YAML profiles will not be accessible. These V2 team configuration files will take precedence. If a team configuration file for profile management is in place at the global level and at the project level, and you have profile names that are the same at both levels, the project level file profile will take precedence over the global level and be shown in your Zowe Explorer view. So let's step into the demo. As you can see here, I have my VS Code open. I have the Zowe V122 open and installed, the one that's available in the marketplace now. And I have a simple settings file created. If you go into your preferences and settings and you check out your user settings, you can flip it on over there and you can see your user settings. This is how it is now with the marketplace version. So I have a packaged V6 of the V2, and I'm going to install that. and we'll see some changes happen to your settings.json. Okay, after installing, you reload. And then you can see some new settings were created using the VS Code standards. Your old settings will be grayed out, but everything should be transferred over into your new settings. And you'll see a message over here saying that you were successfully migrated. And to reload the window, you can click the button. You'll see a new piece here that says Zowe Settings version 2. So this will only happen the first time that you change over to version 2. This will also check your workspace settings. So when you have a workspace folder open and your workspace settings includes any Zowe settings, they will also be migrated to version 2. This will only happen the first time with your global settings, and then you won't ever see it again. But if you do open a new project sometime later and you happen to have Zowe settings at that project level or workspace level of your settings, the migration will happen again for those settings alone. It will not redo your global. So we will click the reload here and open our Zowe view. See, I have a V1 profile here available. I'll pull that up. This was our YAML profile. If you run just Zowe Explorer without the CLI, you know that in the Zowe directory, you have the profiles folder and folders for each type of profile. And as AwesomeF, I have my V1's AwesomeF YAML file here. And that will work as expected and allow you to do all your stuff. So that's your backwards compatibility with your V1 profiles. So there is no need to adopt the new V2 configuration files, but we do recommend it. And it's a lot easier to manage your profiles since they're all going to be in one file versus across different folders and each profile in its own YAML file. So when you're ready to create your first configuration file, you'll click your plus button like you did before for creating a V1. We could continue with our V1 setup and create a new connection that way, and it'll create a separate YAML file for your V1 profile as it has before. But you do see a new option here to create a new team configuration file. And one thing to point out, right now, I do not have a workspace open. It's just VS Code using Zowe. So when I click this, it should automatically create a global configuration file. I'm going to go ahead and pre-warn you, there is a little bug right now. We do have a fix coming in. So as soon as I hit this, you're going to see a little error. And I found it this morning. So that will be fixed. We have a fix for that coming in hopefully today. But if I reload VS Code, you'll see that we have a new icon, a little house for global, and the profile's name. I can right click it and do update credentials, and it's no, not update credentials, sorry, update profile, and it will open up the team configuration file located in your .zowe folder. So this is what it looks like when it's created originally through Zowe Explorer. When that bug is fixed, what VS Code is going to do is you're going to get an information message with the location saying the creation was successful, and there'll be a button to refresh Zowe Explorer. We don't want to refresh it automatically because we want to give you time to edit your file. You'll want to add your host and then any other configurations that may be missing from any defaults that were added from the plugins, built-on extensions, and just other profile types that may be available at the time. So you have your AwesomeF profile with the AwesomeF name, types AwesomeF, and you see it was my default, and so on with the others. So let's add a host here. And I'm going to change this and save it. and update VS Code to pick up these changes. So now if I click the search data, you see we have our user and password in a secure array. So I'll be prompted for my user and password. And if you have the auto store true, it's going to automatically store these values to your credentials, your system credential manager. Another good thing that we've added here, I clicked it earlier by accident, the update credentials. You can also add them to your credentials stored this way by clicking that, and you'll be prompted. But this feature is also really good for if your mainframe credentials expired and you need to update them. And then now, instead of going through and updating all your YAML files with these new credentials, you can click this update credentials and it'll update what you have in your secure credential store. And then you can just move on and start using your profiles as normal. So that's one of the big perks of having this single configuration file for the profile management. So you're not having to go in and update every single profile that you have like you did before with V1. So we can do a search here and I'll enter my credentials. And then we can do our search. And then we'll receive our profiles like we did before with our V1, and all the trees should be working the same. So well, of course, the demo gremlins are going to get me. This was working earlier, but okay. Anyway, let's we'll move on and I'll start talking about the project level configuration. So now if we go in here and we open a folder, let's just grab one. We'll call it test workspace. You see, I have a old one I was messing with earlier. So, and this one has a different host. And I have it set up to go with the API mediation layer. So let's rename this, or I can just, let's create a new one so you can see the actions that I was speaking of earlier with the pop-up message after you create. So now if you click on create team, you have two options here. You have the global option, which will overwrite what you have in your global now if you already have one in place. And then you have the project level. So this will create a new one, and you see it opened it right on up for us, and you get the location of your work, your config file, and it tells you to go ahead and edit and save and then refresh Zowe Explorer, and it gives you a button to click here that you can refresh Zowe Explorer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy all this. And then we'll paste it in here and save. And now I can just pull my little thing up. I could either refresh this. And then there's also the new command palette option, the Zowe Explorer, refresh Zowe Explorer. And then we have quick keys as well. It is Alt-Z. So let's click that. Oh, didn't do it. Let's go back to Zowe and see what we got. All right. And then now you see our Zosimef 1 that is listed here. And our project level is available to add to the view. You see, I renamed this one a different name. That way we can see how you can have access to your global Zosimef as well as your project level Zosimef if the names are different. Now, if they were both the same, the project level would take precedence and you wouldn't be able to access that global one. So since this one is set up to go with the API mediation layer, we'll want to do a login. So we can go over here and click on Login Authentication Services, just like you would with V1. You're prompted for your credentials. And then our login service was successful. And it should have written here. So we got above there. Let's make sure this isn't that one we were looking at. Okay. So yeah, we have an open issue for this as well. It shouldn't have wrote to that file. But we do have some fixes in progress now. But these are the main changes that we have here with Zowe Explorer. It's just mainly picking up the new profile management, and then we have the new settings. We do have some resources here available, and we have our GitHub link in our slides here, so you can go here. If you're at the code and you go to releases, we do have some pre-releases available. And I believe we're going to be putting one more out before we go public on the marketplace with it. So feel free to grab a pre-release and test it out. We greatly appreciate anybody testing the stuff out. If you find any issues, be sure to create one for us. There may already be one open, so you can definitely do a search and see if one is already there. If not, create it. And we just, having the community help us find these bugs, create these issues, we can get on them, fix them, and it just creates a better user experience for everybody, and that's what we're shooting for. Are there any questions?
Yeah. Hey, Billy, I have a question. By the way, that's phenomenal. Thanks for doing that. That was a real masterclass in Zowe Explorer. When you logged into the API mediation layer service, if you had already logged in with your user ID and password, then the secure would have said user ID and password. Then you logged in through the API mediation layer, and it then would have said token. When you logged out, would have it reverted to the user ID and password, or would you have had to re-log in? If you sort of see my question, does it fall back to what you had used beforehand?
With Zowe Explorer, even with V1 profiles, there were some checks in place. And if you had your user and password already stored for these profiles, you would get a message that would pop up and say, this isn't supported for API mediation layer.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, because it already sees you have user and password for authentication. So it's not going to want you to add a token to that.
Okay, that makes sense.
And
that's a good
So that's
catch.
why when your API mediation layer config is created, because when it's originally created, you'll see user and password here in your secure array. And I removed those and put token value. And that lets Zowe Explorer know that this configuration file is going to be used for the API mediation layer, and we want to use token value for authentication versus user and password.
Yeah, so one thing that could be cute with that, I hate to put my work on your plate, but where you've got the graphics of the profiles, you've got ZOSMF and ZOSMF1, one's in the home, one's in the project. Have you thought about perhaps decorating that with whether you have secure being token value or is there a way of knowing that? Do you only put login if you have a base profile? Like, is there any way a user could trip themselves up, or is it very visible as to which one is going to use which method?
No, we don't have that in place now. We didn't have it in V1 either. So it was kind of like the user knew how they set up their profiles to be done. So I believe.
Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, okay,
But we do try to have those things in place to where if a user does try to log in with a profile that wasn't set up for logging in to the API ML, that we would show an information message letting them know that this one isn't supported for that action.
Okay, cool. All right. Thanks, Billy.
You're welcome.
One comment just to add to that. I mean, in this scenario that Billy was walking through, the user administrator setting up their profiles, and that's true for some users today. But what we're also seeing with customers is they might be accessing, like, let's say 60 plus LPARs, and they have, maybe various services on different LPARs, and their environments are complicated in that some are accessed through a mediation layer and require token-based authentication, some are direct to service and require credentials. I think in those organizations, a few people will work together to set up this file, and then all the users will just import this file and get to using it. They won't need to know, like, if there's an API mediation layer in the background or not. I think it'd be somewhat transparent to the majority of users within an organization after, a few admins set it up. I don't know if that helps.
That's a good point, Mike. And I think, Billy, you had mentioned that there was a way to just import that, right? Users can just copy that in.
Yes, the project level, that was one of the main things that the CLI team had, designed that for, to where it could be shared across a team through the project. You would clone your GitHub repo, and then this file may be included in the project, and your authentication methods or values would be secure, but everything else is already set in place. And a system administrator has done this for you. All you got to do is start going with it. If it takes user and password, you'll get prompted. Most likely, if they want you going through the API mediation layer, they'll let you know, so you know what you got to do, and then you'll use the login method, and it'll so the file will be set up for you, and you can just get going. So that makes it a lot nicer for teams that are working on LPARs together, but may have different credentials or something like that.
When in doubt, Zowe.org. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
No, sorry, both Billy and others. So Billy, that was awesome. So I think from that, the main sort of thrust of V2 was to move from the individual profiles to the team config, and you gave an absolute masterclass there on the difference between the global settings and the project settings and passwords. Is there anything else interesting? Any kind of little Easter eggs in V2 for the actual end user function? Once you've authenticated, is there some improvements or new features in searching or anything like that? Or is it really about how you authenticate yourself in a client server?
I think for Zowe Explorer, the main focus on the V2 was being able to support those new team profile configurations. And since those were breaking changes, we thought it was a good time to do those settings updates. There are a few things for extenders. We also did those VS Code standard updates to like the views and everything. We did a lot of renaming. These are big breaking changes, so we didn't want to do it in the middle of V1 or anything. So we have all that, all that information available. If you go to zowe.org and go to the V2 page, and there's some links for Zowe Explorer, it'll take you to our docs. We have docs there for users that are going to be transitioning over. We have docs for extenders that are going to be transitioning over, so everybody knows, any changes made, especially for extenders. We have the breaking changes that they're going to need to adopt.
So I have one question, Billy. So on GA date, so you had to get the VSIX file. I love that you call it V6 file. I'm going to start using that now. I love that. Because you were pointed to the marketplace and you're at 1.22, which is on the marketplace for any other user after the GA date, which I think is next Monday, the 25th. Yeah. Will they literally just hit upgrade and it will go from 1.22 to 2.0 without that?
Exactly.
It will just magically come down.
Let me show you here, if like I said in the slides, if they don't have the auto update set defaults in their settings, the default will take place and they're going to automatically be updated. They don't have to do anything. But a lot of us, developers and stuff, we don't want breaking changes to enter our VS Code space. So we use this auto update and we set it to false. And then as you can see that there'll be a lot of, oh, it looks like I got updated because I cleared my settings today for this demo. But yeah, you would see, you know, this one needs updated, this one needs updated, and you do it at your pleasure, you know. So people that have that set in place, they'll just click here, and then there'll be an update button and tell you, you know, 2.0 is available. But if the user hasn't gone to those depths to make that setting, I think, let's see, it's the, I had it in the slides, let's see. The extensions auto update. If they don't have that in these settings and set defaults, it'll happen automatically. Yes, the extension auto update, and then you can set it to false. The default is true. So if the user didn't specifically go into their settings and set this, they're going to get updated automatically and don't have to do anything. But if you do have this in place, you can go to your extensions, click Zowe Explorer, and you'll see an update button on release day.
Awesome. Thanks, Billy.
You're welcome. Yes, thank you all. And even if you have any questions that come to you after the session ends, feel free to reach out to us on our Slack channel on the Open Mainframe project. And we have the channel Zowe Explorer. You can ask your questions there and we'll answer them there for you. I know sometimes my questions don't come until after the session's ended.
All righty. Thanks, Billy. And thank you all for attending.